Bullies slapped a black girl's cheek, not knowing she was a trained martial artist. The school courtyard was alive with the usual noise of laughter, footsteps, and conversations. Students rushed past in groups, some clutching books, others sharing jokes about teachers and weekend plans. It was an ordinary morning, but for one girl, everything about this day would be remembered forever. Her name was Amara. She was 15 years old, quiet by nature, and known for walking through the halls with her books pressed close to her chest. She did not speak much in class, not because she lacked ideas, but because she had learned that silence often shielded her from unwanted attention. Her grades were excellent. Her teachers admired her discipline, but most of her peers barely noticed her. That morning, Amara had just left the library, carrying 2 heavy textbooks for her next class. The air was cool and she breathed deeply, preparing herself for another long day. She wore a simple white top and blue jeans, clothes she had chosen because they made her feel comfortable, not flashy. She moved quickly, wanting to reach her classroom before the bell rang. But across the courtyard stood a group of boys in red varsity jackets. They were the kind of boys who thought the school belonged to them. Loud, confident, and always laughing, they often mocked others to entertain themselves. Everyone knew them and many feared them. Among them was Jamal, the self-proclaimed leader, who enjoyed being at the center of attention. Jamal noticed Amara passing by. He smirked and nudged his friends. "Look who we've got here," he said loudly, enough for others to hear. "The little quiet girl." His words drew the attention of a few nearby students who slowed down to see what would happen. Amara kept walking, hoping they would lose interest. But Jamal stepped forward, blocking her path. "Hey, pretty girl," he said, his tone mocking. "Where are you rushing off to? Don't you want to talk to us?" His friends laughed behind him, clapping each other on the shoulders as though he had said something clever. She froze. Her heart raced, but she kept her eyes down. She had faced moments like this before. Words thrown like stones, laughter that stung more than any slap. She tried to sidestep him, but he moved to block her again. "Come on," another boy added. "Don't be rude. We're just being friendly." The group closed in around her. Students nearby whispered and glanced at the scene. Some giggled nervously while others looked away, pretending not to notice. This was how it always went. The bullies entertained themselves and everyone else acted as if nothing was happening. Amara tightened her grip on her books. She wanted to speak, but fear pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. She took a step back, but Jamal leaned forward, his smirk growing. "You think you're too good for us?" he sneered. Then without warning, he raised his hand and slapped her across the cheek. The sound cracked through the courtyard like lightning. Gasps echoed. Some students covered their mouths, others whispered louder. A few laughed uncomfortably as though unsure how to react. Jamal's friends burst into louder laughter, cheering him on. Amara staggered back slightly, her cheek burning from the sting. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. Her throat tightened, and for a moment tears threatened to fall. But she swallowed them back, refusing to let them see her cry. Her silence made Jamal laugh harder.
"See, I told you she's nothing."
"Just a quiet little mouse." He raised his hand again, pretending as if he might slap her once more. But this time Amara looked up. Her eyes, once filled with fear, locked onto his. She did not say a word, but the way she stared at him made him pause for a brief second. Something in her gaze unsettled him. She remembered her father's words, spoken during long evenings in their small backyard where he trained her in martial arts. "Strength is not about hurting others, Amara. It is about knowing when to stand tall, even if the world wants to push you down." She had trained for years, kicks, blocks, movements that demanded balance, discipline, and control. It had always been her secret, something she never showed at school. To her, it was not about impressing anyone. It was about being prepared, about carrying a strength no one else could take away. Now, standing in the courtyard with the sting of humiliation on her cheek, she realized this was the moment she had been unknowingly preparing for. She did not lash out, not yet. She simply stood taller, placing her books down gently on the bench beside her. Jamal noticed the change in her posture but shrugged it off, mistaking her calmness for surrender. "What are you going to do?" he mocked, laughing again. "Stare at me? That's all you got?" His friends laughed louder, trying to bury their own unease. Amara's breathing slowed. She remembered every lesson, every drill, every time her father reminded her that self-control was her greatest weapon. She did not want to fight. She wanted respect. The courtyard grew quieter. More students had gathered now, sensing something different about the moment. It was no longer just another scene of bullies picking on a quiet girl. Something was shifting and everyone could feel it. Amara touched her cheek where he had slapped her, then lowered her hand. Slowly she spoke, her voice steady and clear. "You do not get to treat me like that." The words cut through the air like a blade. Jamal blinked, surprised. His friends stopped laughing for a moment. No one had ever spoken back to him like that. The silence stretched. Students leaned closer, waiting to see what would happen. Amara stood tall, her shoulders straight, her eyes locked on Jamal's. She was no longer the girl they thought she could humiliate. In that moment, something inside her shifted forever. The sting on Amara's cheek had faded, but the memory of that slap burned stronger than fire. Around her, whispers circled like wind through the trees. Students looked at her with wide eyes, some out of pity, others out of fear of what might come next. Jamal and his friends still laughed, trying to hold on to their image of power. But their laughter no longer echoed the same way. Amara stood there, calm on the outside, but inside her chest her heart pounded. She had been trained for moments like this, though she had never imagined that the training her father had insisted upon would matter in the school courtyard. Her father, Marcus, had once been a soldier. Not many people knew that. To the world, he was just a man who worked 2 jobs to support his daughter. But inside their small home, he was also a mentor, a teacher of discipline, and the person who had given Amara something stronger than fear: control. She remembered being 8 years old when he first placed a practice pad in her hands. "This is not for fighting," he had told her. "This is for protecting. Protecting yourself, protecting your spirit, and protecting your dignity." She had nodded, not fully understanding at the time, but she never forgot the way his voice carried both love and seriousness. From then on, their evenings were filled with practice. While other children played in the streets, Amara learned stances, balance, and the rhythm of movement. At first she stumbled, fell, and grew frustrated. But her father would smile patiently and lift her up. "Falling is not failure," he would remind her. "It's training your body to rise stronger." Years of repetition had shaped her muscles, sharpened her focus, and given her something no bully could see: quiet confidence. Yet she never showed it. At school she kept to herself, allowing people to underestimate her. It was easier that way, or at least it had been, until now. Back in the courtyard, Jamal stepped forward again, smirking. "What's that look for?" he mocked. "You think you're tough now? You think you can stand against us?" His friends echoed his words, trying to spark laughter, but there was hesitation in their voices. Amara did not reply. Instead, she took one deep breath, the way her father had taught her before every sparring session. Calm mind, steady hands, clear focus. Her cheeks still tingled from the slap, but she used that pain as a reminder she was not weak. She had never been weak. She bent slightly, placing her books carefully on the bench beside her. The action was simple, almost gentle, yet the entire courtyard seemed to hold its breath. The boys sneered. "What, you gonna run away now?" one of them asked. Another added, "She's scared." Look at her, she's shaking, but Amara was not shaking. Her body was aligning itself, remembering every stance, every movement. She turned slowly to face them, her eyes unblinking. "You should not have touched me," she said softly, but with a weight that carried across the courtyard. For a moment, Jamal laughed again, louder, trying to mask the unease growing inside him. "Or what? What are you gonna do, quiet girl?" It was then that one of his friends, Malik, reached out, trying to grab her shoulder as if to prove her powerless. It was a mistake. Without hesitation, Amara shifted her weight, lifted her arm, and twisted sharply. In one swift, fluid motion, she broke free from his grip, pushing his hand away with controlled force. The movement was so quick, so precise, that Malik stumbled backward in surprise. Gasps filled the air. Students leaned forward, eyes wide. It was the first time they had seen her move like that. It was not wild flailing, not desperate resistance, it was skill, clean and unmistakable. Amara did not smile, did not boast. She simply stood her ground, her arms lowered but steady, her stance balanced. Her silence spoke louder than words. She was not prey. The laughter faded into uneasy chuckles. Jamal frowned, his smirk faltering. He had expected tears, maybe a scream, maybe even a teacher rushing in to save her. He had not expected her to defend herself so effortlessly. "What was that?" one boy muttered, his voice betraying nerves. Malik rubbed his wrist, glaring but unsure if he wanted to step closer again. The confidence that had fueled their bullying was beginning to crack. Amara remembered another of her father's lessons. Do not fight for pride. Fight only when you must, and when you do, let your control be your shield. She did not lunge forward. She did not attack. She simply remained still, her eyes locked on Jamal, her body telling him and everyone else that she was no longer a victim. "Leave me alone," she said, her voice calm, firm, unshaken. The courtyard, once filled with noise, now felt silent except for the pounding of hearts. Students who had once looked away now stood in awe, realizing that they were witnessing something they would never forget. The moment a girl who had been mocked, silenced, and humiliated revealed her strength. And yet, the confrontation was not over. Jamal could not let it end there, not in front of everyone. He clenched his fists, his pride wounded. To him, this was not just about bullying anymore. It was about control, about keeping the image he had built for himself. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only his friends and Amara could hear. "You think one little move makes you strong? I can still break you." Amara did not flinch. She took another deep breath, centering herself. She knew this was not about proving herself to him. It was about proving something to herself. Around them, the circle of students grew tighter. Phones were pulled out. Whispers rushed through the crowd, and everyone sensed that the moment was building toward something bigger. Amara's calmness was not the calmness of surrender. It was the calm before a storm. And in that courtyard, with dozens of eyes watching, the story of the quiet girl was about to change forever. The air in the courtyard had shifted. What had started as another cruel show for the bullies was now something entirely different. Amara, the quiet girl they had mocked for years, no longer looked like the easy target they thought she was. Her calmness, her steady eyes, her simple refusal to be broken. It unsettled them more than any shout or cry ever could. Jamal, however, was not the kind of boy to let go of his pride. His friends still stood behind him, waiting, unsure if they should laugh or stay silent. Around them, students pressed closer, whispering, recording, watching. The humiliation he had tried to force on Amara was slowly bouncing back on him. He clenched his jaw. "You think you're strong now? Just because you pushed Malik back?" His voice was loud, meant to remind everyone that he was still in control. "Don't forget who runs this school." Amara did not move. Her heart was still beating fast, but she kept her breathing steady, the way her father had taught her. She knew that showing fear would only feed them. And she knew something else too. This was not only about her anymore. It was about every quiet student who had walked past them with lowered eyes. "Respect runs this school," she said finally, her voice low but clear enough to be heard. The words caught the crowd off guard. Whispers rippled through the students, and a few even nodded. Jamal's pride flared. He stepped closer, lifting his hand again as if to slap her once more, to prove that she had not changed anything. His friends leaned forward, expecting another loud moment, another strike that would silence her. But Amara was ready. As his hand swung toward her, she moved with precision. She did not hit him back. Instead, she raised her arm, blocked his strike, and twisted his wrist just enough to stop him. It was not violent, it was controlled, sharp and undeniable. The courtyard gasped again. Jamal froze, pain flickering across his face. He yanked his hand back quickly, more shocked than hurt. For the first time, he looked at her not as a victim, but as someone he could not easily overpower. You saw that?" One student whispered. Another replied. She stopped him. "Did you see how fast she moved?" The bullies looked around nervously. Their audience was no longer entertained, they were impressed. And that shift in energy was dangerous for Jamal, because he thrived on fear, not respect. Amara straightened her posture again. Her voice did not rise, but it carried weight. "You think power is in hurting people, but real strength is in control." Her words struck deeper than her block had. Some of the boys laughed nervously to cover their discomfort. Malik muttered, "She's just lucky. She can't keep that up." But the crowd was not convinced. Phones captured the moment, and students whispered Amara's name as if it belonged to someone entirely new. Jamal's pride boiled. "So what? You think you're better than me now? You think this makes you strong? Amara held his gaze. I do not need to be better than you. I just need to be myself. Those words silenced even the laughter of his friends. They looked at her with something they had never given her before. Acknowledgement. For Amara, this was the turning point. She realized that her strength was not about fighting, not about winning or losing. It was about standing when someone tried to push her down. It was about refusing to let them define her. The courtyard remained still, heavy with the weight of her quiet defiance. Students who had once walked past scenes of bullying without speaking now felt something stir in them. Her courage was contagious. A teacher's voice suddenly cut through the silence. What is going on here? Mr. Johnson, one of the senior staff, rushed across the courtyard, his eyes darting from Jamal to Amara to the circle of students. No one spoke immediately. Jamal quickly straightened, trying to regain control. Nothing, sir, he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost respectful. We were just talking. But dozens of eyes told a different story. Some students lowered their phones, but the truth was already spreading beyond the courtyard. Mr. Johnson looked at Amara, then at the boys. His sharp gaze lingered on Jamal. Get to class, he ordered, his tone stern. The crowd began to disperse, but the whispers grew louder. Everyone who had seen it would remember. Everyone who had watched her stand tall would carry that memory. As the bullies walked away, their steps less confident than before, Amara quietly picked up her books again. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply walked toward her classroom, her head held high. But inside she felt something she had never felt before in school. Not fear, not shame, but pride. She had stood tall. She had shown them that she was not the quiet girl they thought they could humiliate. She had revealed the strength her father had built into her every lesson, every evening of practice, every word of wisdom, and she knew this was only the beginning. The turning point had come, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been silent in the face of cruelty. The school day moved on, but the echoes of that courtyard moment did not fade. By lunchtime, the whispers had spread like wildfire through every hallway. Some said Amara had blocked Jamal's slap with lightning speed. Others claimed she had pushed him so hard he almost fell. The truth, twisted by retellings, became legend. But at the heart of every version was one fact. Amara, the quiet girl, had stood her ground. When she entered the cafeteria, trays clattering and voices buzzing, dozens of eyes followed her. She kept her head down at first, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. For years she had walked invisibly, slipping between crowds without notice. Now she was the subject of every conversation. A group of girls at one table whispered, one leaning close to the other. That's her. The one who stopped Jamal. Another added softly. She didn't even flinch. Can you imagine? Amara carried her tray to a corner table, the same spot she always chose. She did not want to be a spectacle. She only wanted peace. Yet deep inside, she felt a flicker of something she had never felt at school before. Validation. For once, people were not laughing at her. They were seeing her, but Jamal and his friends were not about to let the story end there. They entered the cafeteria with their usual swagger, though this time it was forced. Their voices were louder than usual, their laughter sharper, as if they were trying to erase the morning's memory. Don't believe everything you hear, Jamal announced loudly. His words directed at no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone. She just got lucky, that's all. His friends nodded, laughing along, but the unease in their eyes betrayed them. Amara lifted her fork slowly, ignoring them. But she knew it was not over. That afternoon, as students left the building, Jamal cornered her again near the lockers. His friends stood behind him, though they were quieter than before. The hallway had emptied, but a few students lingered at a distance, curious if something would happen again. You think you embarrassed me this morning? Jamal hissed, his voice lower now, not for show, but from pride wounded. You think you made me look weak? Amara set her books against the locker door, her eyes steady. She had learned something that morning. Fear only grows when you feed it. And she was done feeding his. I did not embarrass you, she said calmly. You embarrassed yourself. The words cut deeper than any strike could. Jamal's face tightened. He stepped closer, his presence looming. You're going to regret saying that. But before he could act, Amara shifted. Her body moved, not with anger, but with control. She stepped back, lifted her hand slightly, and stood in a balanced stance. Shoulders squared, knees soft, eyes unflinching. It was not aggression. It was readiness. Her stance spoke louder than her words. "If you touch me again, I will not let you." One of Jamal's friends muttered nervously, "Man, maybe just let it go." Another whispered, "She's serious." Look at her. But Jamal's pride burned too hot. He swung his hand forward again, aiming for her shoulder this time. In one swift motion, Amara blocked his arm and pivoted. She did not strike him. She simply redirected his movement, stepping aside with such precision that he stumbled forward, catching himself on the lockers. The sound of his hand hitting metal echoed down the hall. The watching students gasped again. Amara's voice was steady. "You cannot control me with fear." The hallway was silent. Jamal turned back, his face red, but he could not hide the truth. She had stopped him again, calmly, efficiently, without violence. And this time more witnesses saw it. The stand she took in that hallway was different from the courtyard. The courtyard had been shock. This was confirmation. This was proof. Word spread even faster now. Students who had once avoided Amara began to look at her with admiration. Some came up quietly to thank her. A freshman whispered, "You're so brave." "He used to shove me around too." Another student admitted, "I wish I had your courage." Amara listened, humbled. She had never wanted to be a hero. She only wanted to be left alone. But now she realized her stand was not just for her. It was for everyone who had suffered in silence. That evening, when she returned home, her father noticed the change in her eyes. He set down his tools and asked gently, "What happened today, Amara?" She hesitated at first, then told him everything. The slap, the block, the way the crowd had watched, the way Jamal had tried again and failed. Marcus listened silently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I taught you discipline so you would never need to fight for pride. You remembered that today? I'm proud of you." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "But it feels like it's not over." "He won't stop," her father nodded. "Bullies rarely stop because of one lesson. But each time you stand, you teach them something. And more importantly, you teach yourself something. Courage grows when it is tested." Amara thought about those words long after dinner. She knew he was right. Courage was not a single act, it was a choice made over and over again. The next day at school, students watched her differently. She could feel their eyes, but instead of shrinking, she walked taller. She had taken a stand, and now, even in silence, that stand gave her strength. But Jamal was not finished. And deep down, Amara knew the biggest test of her courage was still coming. The tension from the hallway incident carried into the following week. By now, almost every student in school had heard about what had happened. Some spoke of it as if it were a movie scene. "Did you see how fast she moved?" Others repeated her words, "You cannot control me with fear." For Amara, the attention was new and uncomfortable. She had spent years slipping quietly through hallways, unnoticed, a shadow no one bothered with. Now eyes followed her everywhere. Whispers chased her steps. She did not know whether to feel proud or nervous. On Monday morning, she entered her first class to find students glancing up as she walked in. A few smiled at her, nodding in quiet acknowledgement. One boy, who used to tease her about always raising her hand in class, whispered, "Hey, that was brave what you did." She only gave a small nod in return, unsure how to respond. Even teachers had begun to notice. Mr. Johnson, the staff member who had broken up the courtyard crowd, stopped her after class. "Amara," he said firmly but kindly, "I saw what happened. You showed control, not recklessness. That matters." His words carried weight. For once, authority had seen her not as a problem, but as a young woman with strength. Still, not everyone celebrated her. Jamal and his friends walked the hallways with forced laughter, their pride cracked but not gone. They avoided direct confrontation for now, but their glares followed her. Pride is not easy to let go, and Amara knew they would not simply forget. At lunch, however, something happened that changed the story even more. As she carried her tray toward her usual corner table, a small group of students waved her over. They were not part of the popular crowd, nor were they the usual outcasts. They were ordinary students, people who, like her, had lived quietly in the background. "Sit with us," one of them offered. Amara hesitated, unused to such invitations. But their smiles were genuine, their eyes filled with admiration, not mockery. She joined them, placing her tray down slowly. A girl with glasses leaned forward. You don't know what that meant, what you did, she said softly. He pushed me last year in the hallway. I never told anyone. I just walked away. Watching you stand up to him, it made me wish I had done the same. Another boy nodded. He used to shove my brother too. Nobody ever stopped him, but now, maybe he'll think twice. Amara listened, her heart heavy yet hopeful. She had never realized how many others had carried the same quiet wounds. Her act of courage had not only freed her, it had freed others too. Later that week during gym class, her secret became more visible. The coach had assigned sparring drills in pairs. Students shuffled nervously, some joking about who would win. When it was Amara's turn, she moved with grace and precision, her stances clean, her movements sharp. Her partner tried to tag her shoulder, but she blocked swiftly, redirecting the move with ease. Gasps filled the room. Students who had only heard stories now saw the truth. Amara was not lucky, she was trained. She was strong. Even the coach raised his eyebrows. Impressive, he muttered. By the time the drill ended, students stared at her not with pity but with respect. And for the first time in her life, Amara allowed herself to stand tall under their gaze. That afternoon, as she left school, something unexpected happened. A group of younger students, 2 girls and a boy, ran up to her. "Amara," one of them said shyly, can you teach us?" She blinked, surprised. "Teach you what?" "Teach us what you know, so we don't have to be scared anymore." Her heart softened. She thought of the nights in her backyard, training under her father's watchful eyes. She thought of every fall, every bruise, every word of encouragement, and she realized something. Maybe her training had never just been about her. Maybe it was meant to be shared. She smiled gently. "It takes discipline," she told them. "It's not about fighting. It's about respect for yourself and others." The children nodded eagerly. Their eyes sparkled with hope. At home, when she told her father about this, he chuckled warmly. "See, strength spreads. What you carry inside inspires others to carry their own." Amara looked at him, her heart swelling with pride. "But it feels like I'm carrying more than I expected." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "That is what leadership feels like. Heavy at first, but it is also a gift." In the following days, more students approached her quietly. Some asked questions. Some simply offered a smile. One even thanked her for making school feel safer. She did not feel like a hero. She felt like herself. But somehow being herself was finally enough. Jamal, meanwhile, found his influence shrinking. His friends no longer laughed as loudly at his jokes. The younger students avoided him. Teachers paid closer attention to his behavior. And every time he passed Amara in the hallway, the memory of her calm defiance lingered between them. He hated it, but he could not erase it. The respect Amara earned was not loud or showy. It was quiet, steady, and real. The kind that does not need shouting to be heard. The kind that lasts. And as she walked into school one bright morning, shoulders back, eyes forward, she realized something else. Respect was not given to her. She had claimed it by refusing to be broken, and once earned, no one, not even Jamal, could take it away. The week rolled into the next, and something had shifted in the very rhythm of the school. What once had been ruled by noise and cruelty now carried a quieter strength, a new kind of awareness. Students who once laughed at the suffering of others were beginning to pause, to think, to question. All because one girl had chosen not to bend under humiliation. Amara noticed it in small moments. A boy who had often been shoved aside in the cafeteria now walked through the line without being pushed. A group of girls, once teased for their clothes, found the taunts silenced when Amara's name was whispered nearby. Even Jamal, who still carried his wounded pride, had grown cautious. He did not reach out his hands to shove anymore. His laughter no longer filled the hallways with the same easy confidence. But it was not just about Jamal. It was about the way her courage had spread beyond her control. Students she had never spoken to before now nodded at her, sometimes stopping her to say, "Thank you." A freshman girl with trembling hands had approached her one morning. "Amara," she whispered, "last year, they used to trip me in the hall. I thought I had to keep quiet. But when I saw you stand tall, I realized I can, too." Amara had listened with patience, her heart swelling with both sorrow for the girl's pain and pride that she had inspired hope. At first, she was overwhelmed. She had never wanted to be in the center. She had never asked for an audience. But slowly, she began to understand. Her stand had not been hers alone. It had become a lesson, a spark, something bigger than her. Her father saw it too. One evening, as they sat in their small living room, he looked at her with steady eyes. "Do you see what you've done?" he asked. "I only stood up for myself," Amara replied softly. Marcus shook his head. "No, you showed them what dignity looks like. You showed them that silence does not have to mean surrender. You showed them strength without cruelty. That is rare. That is powerful." She absorbed his words, the weight of them settling into her heart. It was true. She had not raised her fists in anger. She had not tried to humiliate Jamal in return. She had only stood tall, defended herself, and spoken with calm certainty. And somehow that had taught more than shouting ever could. In the following days, students began to seek her out, not for spectacle, but for guidance. It started small. During lunch, a boy sat across from her, shifting nervously before asking, "How did you do it? How did you not cry when he slapped you?" Amara thought carefully before answering. "I wanted to cry," she admitted honestly. "But I remembered my father's words. Strength is not about hurting others. It is about standing tall when they try to break you." So I stood tall. The boy nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. Later, two girls asked her if she could show them some of the movements she used. They did not want to fight, they explained, but they wanted to feel less afraid. Amara hesitated. Teaching others had never been her plan. But when she saw the way their eyes lit with hope, she agreed. So in the quiet corner of the gym after classes had ended, Amara showed them the basics: how to hold a stance, how to block, how to stay balanced. She repeated the lessons her father had given her, stressing over and over again, "This is not for hurting. It's for protecting. Protecting yourself and protecting your dignity." The girls practiced awkwardly at first, stumbling and laughing at their own mistakes. But Amara smiled, remembering her own clumsy beginnings. She encouraged them patiently, reminding them that every strong person starts small. Soon, more students joined. What began as a few curious requests grew into small gatherings. A handful of younger students lingered after school, waiting for her to guide them. They copied her stances, listened to her advice, and left with a little more confidence than they had come with. Amara's secret was no longer hers alone. It was becoming a gift she shared. And through it all, she kept reminding them, strength is not in fists. Strength is in control. The lesson began to ripple through the school. Teachers noticed a change in the atmosphere. Fewer fights broke out. More students reported bullying when they saw it. The laughter that once followed cruel jokes now faded into silence. Something in the air had shifted, not because authority had cracked down, but because students had seen what courage looked like, and they wanted to carry it too. Jamal, however, simmered in silence. His pride had been wounded deeply. Though he no longer dared to strike Amara, his glare still followed her. Yet even his power was slipping. His friends no longer cheered as loudly. The crowd no longer fed his cruelty. He was beginning to realize that fear was a weak foundation, and once it cracked, it could not be rebuilt easily. One afternoon, as Amara was packing her books, a younger boy approached her timidly. His voice shook as he said, "I used to think being quiet meant being weak, but now I see. Maybe it just means waiting for the right moment to speak." Her eyes softened. She reached out, gently resting a hand on his shoulder. "Quiet is not weakness," she told him. "Quiet can be strength. Because when you finally choose to speak, your words carry weight." The boy smiled for the first time she had seen, and ran off to join his friends. Amara sat in silence for a moment after he left, her heart full. She had never imagined her pain could turn into someone else's hope. But here it was, unfolding in front of her. At home, her father noticed her shoulders carried a new kind of weight. "It feels heavy sometimes, doesn't it?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, everyone looks at me now. They ask me for advice. They expect me to be brave all the time." Marcus leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "That is the truth of leadership, Amara. People think courage means never being afraid, but real courage is choosing to stand, even when fear is still in your chest. You showed them that once. You can show them again." His words settled into her heart. She understood then that her journey was no longer just about surviving humiliation. It was about teaching others that they could rise, too. The lesson she carried, the lesson she now shared, was simple but powerful. Respect yourself, and others will learn to respect you. And as the school continued to change, as the whispers of fear faded into whispers of hope, Amara realized something she had never dared to believe before. She was no longer invisible. She had become a lesson, and that lesson was changing lives. The school had changed. It did not happen in a single day or a single week, but the ripple that began in the courtyard continued to spread until it touched nearly every corner. Teachers noticed fewer reports of bullying. Students who once stood by in silence now stepped forward when they saw something wrong. And at the heart of it all was Amara, the girl who had once been invisible, now standing as a quiet symbol of courage. But Amara herself never thought of it as glory. She still walked the halls with her books pressed to her chest, still chose the corner seat in class, still spent long evenings studying. The difference was not in her routine. It was in how others saw her, and how she now saw herself. She had stopped being the quiet girl. She was Amara, the one who had turned humiliation into strength. One morning, as she entered the school, a group of freshmen waved at her. "Good morning, Amara," one of them called cheerfully. She smiled back, realizing how natural it had become for students to greet her now, not with mockery but with respect. In the cafeteria, a younger student once whispered to her, "You made me believe I can walk without fear." Those words stayed with her. It was not about the slap anymore. It was not about Jamal. It was about the lesson that strength is not cruelty and dignity is power. That was the seed she had planted, and now it was blooming. Even Jamal had changed. He still carried pride in his walk, still tried to joke with his friends, but the fire in his bullying had dimmed. He avoided Amara now, not because he feared her fists, she had never struck him, but because he feared her calm. He feared the way her quiet strength had unraveled the control he once had over the school. One afternoon, Amara found herself in the library, sitting at a table with 3 younger students. They had asked her to show them how to focus their breathing before a test. She guided them gently, reminding them that calm minds perform best. As they practiced, one girl whispered, "You're like our big sister." The words warmed her heart. She had never thought of herself that way, but in many ways it was true. She was no longer just surviving her own struggles, she was guiding others through theirs. At home, her father noticed the change in her smile. One evening, as they shared dinner, he said, "You've become more than a student, Amara. You've become a teacher." She paused, surprised. "A teacher?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "Not of math or history, but of courage. You showed them how to stand, and now they are learning from you. That is teaching." Amara thought about his words long after. She remembered the sting of that slap, the laughter that followed, the shame that almost broke her. And she remembered the choice she made to stand tall, to hold her ground, to show control instead of fear. That choice had rewritten her story, and now she realized it was rewriting others' stories too. As weeks turned into months, Amara continued to grow. She kept training in martial arts, not for revenge but for discipline. She helped students after school, not as a formal club but as a safe space where they could practice, talk, and share their struggles. Slowly, it became more than training. It became community. Students who once felt invisible began to walk taller. Those who had once laughed at cruelty now stayed silent or even spoke against it. The culture of the school was shifting, one step at a time. The principal eventually heard of her influence and invited her to speak during an assembly on bullying. Standing on the stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, Amara felt the old nervousness in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. But then she remembered her father's voice. Quiet is not weakness. When you finally choose to speak, your words carry weight. She took a deep breath. "I was once humiliated in this school," she began, her voice clear though soft. "I was slapped in front of everyone. People laughed, and I wanted to cry, but I realized I could not let someone else decide my worth. So I stood tall. I blocked his hand. I did not fight him. I did not hurt him. I just showed him and myself that I am not weak." The room was silent. Students leaned forward, listening. Teachers nodded. She continued, her voice growing steadier. "Strength is not in fists. Strength is in control. It is in respect. You do not need to be cruel to be powerful. You only need to respect yourself enough to stand when others try to push you down." When she finished, the silence turned into applause, loud, honest, and long. Amara's heart raced, but it was not fear this time. It was pride, real and deep. After the assembly, students she had never spoken to before came up to her, some with tears in their eyes. "You gave me courage," one said. "You made me believe I don't have to hide," said another. Her father, standing quietly at the back, simply smiled. In that moment, Amara understood fully. Her story was no longer just her own. It was a mirror for others, a reminder that dignity can rise even from humiliation, that strength can grow even in silence, and that one person's courage can light the path for many. The bullies had tried to break her with cruelty, but instead they had awakened her strength. They had turned her from invisible to unforgettable. And as she walked out of the assembly hall, students clapping her on the back, smiling at her, thanking her, Amara carried only one thought in her heart. No matter how cruel the world may be, respect, courage, and dignity will always turn pain into power. She had not just survived. She had inspired.